trends that we see in FCPA that are coming out loud and clear in this conference, I think, are number one, an increase in resources for enforcement authorities. And what I mean by that, and what we're hearing, are the development of the FBI team that's working with DOJ. Even though that started about a year and a half ago, from the FBI speeches that we heard today, they're really starting to gain a competence in investigating foreign bribery and corruption. And that is really going to increase the capabilities of DOJ itself. And the other trends we're hearing are an increased cooperation between DOJ and SEC, but other agencies within the government that are responsible in some way for law enforcement. We also noticed that the Obama administration has announced a new task force specifically to draw in a lot of different competencies from across the federal spectrum to focus specifically on financial crimes. And I think we can expect that to focus also on fraud and corruption. We're hearing a lot about pharma. Pharmaceutical industry is most definitely under the microscope. Specific areas have been announced at the conference that are going to be looked into, particularly licensing and registration. But also, we look at the increased global scope of DOJ's investigations. Pharma is involved in a lot of development projects around the world, and agencies like the World Bank have recently developed and found cartels and fraud and corruption in their projects, and these are going to be the actors in these, the subjects of these are the same companies that are now going to be looked at by DOJ for licensing and registration fraud and corruption occurring abroad. We've seen increased competitive pressures in the United States that by and large have really driven the FCPA enforcement over the last 7 years. Now we're starting to see international initiatives really get some traction and start to increase pressures abroad. For instance, the proposed anti-bribery legislation going through Parliament in the UK is increasing pressures on UK companies to try to level the playing field. The increased enforcement actions we're seeing in the EU, which are pushed primarily by the ECOD Convention Against Bribery, we're seeing increased enforcement and prosecutions across the EU in a very recent time span. So now we have EU companies that are becoming more and more concerned about, again, leveling the playing field. So whereas traditionally we've seen investigations starting in the United States, and then certain pressures are put on European countries to do their own investigations and their own prosecutions, we're going to start seeing the reverse. And I think we're going to start really feeling this increased international competitive push for companies around the world and countries around the world, and particularly the US, to really ramp up their enforcement efforts. In the context of the current economic situation worldwide, we're finding a significantly increased challenge in defending large corporations and high wealth individuals in the court of public opinion, and in all opinions, and in courts and in front of law enforcement agencies. And I think that really underscores the critical importance these days of having a crisis management and PR perspective and team involved in your defense. They have to come in very early to shape public opinion to the extent that it can be shaped, so that a well-reasoned and well-strategized defense can really materialize.